This podcast is part of E2C Network, where we share the whole Auburn experience.
Where you go, Auburn fans? Welcome to No Huddle, your source for Auburn football news and discussion, part of the E2C Network. I'm Major Richardson, and I also brought along my buddy, my pal, Jared Davis. How you doing, Jared? It's season's almost here. How you doing?
I'm good, man. Yeah, I'm good. What is it, like 10 days away? 11? I don't know. I hadn't done the math yet, but it's here.
Hey, and we're going to have some football in just a few days. Maybe by the time you, the listener, listening to this, you may have already seen a college football game.
Actually, there is. I think Florida State plays this Saturday in Ireland.
How cool is that?
How cool is that? Nowhere near Tallahassee.
I had a coworker, because they're playing Georgia Tech, is that right? I think that's right.
Yeah, they're like, I mean, they're probably like 200 miles away from each other. They said, let's go like 2,000 miles away and play each other.
Yeah. Which I personally love the idea, expanding college football to other areas. It's kind of like, here in Atlanta, we'll have like a Premier League team come to the Mercedes-Benz in Atlanta. And they, that's obviously way far away from where they're normally. But it's kind of cool to, see different perspectives on different sports. I don't know. That's one of the big things. We just got over the Olympics. I personally love all the different sports and all the different ways you can play a game. So I think that's a good thing, and it kind of just broadens the exposure of college football. But let's talk about the season preview, because man, as expected, there's a lot of off-season stuff that happens, particularly after the year one under Hugh Freeze. This will be his second year as head coach at Auburn. I just remember back to it, and Jared, I know we had talked about this, but I wanted to bring this back to our listeners' minds. Hugh Freeze had talked to Nick Saban after his first season, and he was like, "Hey, Nick, wanted to get some advice." And apparently Nick Saban gave him some advice, saying he regretted when he came to Alabama after his first year not making a bunch of changes that he really wanted to make. Now, obviously, Alabama built up its dynasty to, have tons of national championships, but Nick Saban still regretted that he didn't make changes earlier. And I feel like Hugh made a lot of changes. He changed offensive coordinators. He changed defensive coordinators. Almost most of our main assistant coaches got flipped. We got new. And overall, I think our coaching staff is much better for it, from what we can tell. Essentially, at this point, Hughes hired a offensive coordinator who's mostly going to be a running backs coach, and then Hugh Freeze should be the offensive coordinator, kind of working with Derek Nix, our offensive coordinator. He hired a new defensive coordinator for DJ Durkin, and people, despite all of the stuff at Maryland, I think as a football coach, he is an awesome coach and does what he's made a name for himself. And so that by itself, all of those kind of general changes, I think is kind of, pretty exciting for Auburn fans. Not to mention all the transfers, all the excitement of, it feels like almost every year now with the transfer portal, it feels kind of like a brand new team every single year. Though I will say Auburn kept a lot of their older guys, which always is a good thing if they're older and have maturity and are wise and played well. I feel like that's a good sign, especially trying to build a culture. So, Jared, before we get into the specifics, let's talk about coaches. What's kind of your thoughts on the coaching moves that Hugh Freeze made? Because, it felt like they all made sense, and now we're going to see if that plays out on the football field.
Yeah, he definitely made some changes. Most notably, Cadillac is not with us, and, Zach Etheridge. We've had a lot of former Auburn coaches be on staff, and I don't, the only problem with that is, it's if you ever need to let them go, it's hard to let them go, right?
Yeah.
It's hard to see those guys go, but listen, I think you have on our little sheet here, 2022 we went 5-7, 2023 we went 6-7. You got to make changes, and I know that it probably ruffled some feathers on losing some of the coaches, but you got to try to get better. And I don't know much about these people. I know Durkin has a good track record defensively. Obviously, you know, there's stuff at Maryland. Obviously, people have their thoughts about. Not going to tell people how to think about that. But if you're looking at strictly X's and O's, coaching ability, I think he knows what he's doing. From that standpoint alone, he might be one of the best defensive coordinators we've had in a while. I think Charles Kelly is the guy who can land all the big recruits. Not saying Durkin cannot, but I think Kelly's known to be a recruiter. He learned under Nick Saban. Derek Nix is apparently a really good recruiter. Has a lot of ties in Mississippi, and there's some good talent that comes out of Mississippi. So, and him and Hugh Freeze know each other.
And I mean, he coached at Ole Miss for 16 years.
Yeah.
And I mean, just imagine in today's age where you coach at a school for that long. I mean, it's just crazy to think about. But I think that just shows Hugh Freeze's, pitch for this Auburn team was good enough for somebody like Derek Nix, who's been at Ole Miss for 16 years, to come to Auburn and say, hey, this could be an amazing opportunity for you career-wise, jumping to an offensive coordinator. And who knows, Auburn could do some amazing stuff.
I think it also, we're still Auburn. Like, Ole Miss is potentially on one of the greatest rises they've ever had, maybe.
Yeah.
And we're on one of our worst. And we were still appealing enough to a coach to come to us.
Exactly.
And I mean, I saw a recent thing today actually, and it had top programs of all time, and it only listed the top 25. And I think it had Auburn at 13.
Wow.
People forget that, right? I mean, Georgia's up to number 11. They've had a great last few years. We were very similar until then. One that people forget about is Tennessee. Tennessee's at number 10. You wouldn't think that Nebraska's up there, right? So, like, Auburn is still Auburn. And the one final thing I will end on this piece, I think Hugh making these decisions, whether they are right or wrong, we will not know until the season. But I think it's a clear sign that we finally have somebody who's been given the control that is needed, because I don't know that coaches in the past could have gotten rid of some of the coaches they did. I think they might have been talked into keeping them because they're Auburn men. Love Auburn men. Love Cadillac. Love them all. But sometimes you need a change.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we do still have one guy, Marcus Davis, and he's our wide receivers coach. He also played at Auburn.
But Hugh brought him in. Like, that was his guy, right?
And obviously look at the wide receiver class, and a lot of that is attributed to Marcus Davis as a recruiter. And if he can get out of our wide receivers more than we've gotten out in the past, I'm going to be happy, because first off, Hugh Freeze knows how to get wide receivers open. And I think that's, especially with now the bigger recruits that we're getting, you're going to see a little bit more of that.
You can be a subpar coach at your position. If you start landing more Cam Colemans and Perry Thompson, you can it'll cover up a lot of deficiencies you might have as a coach, if you have any.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I feel like that part by itself is also kind of exciting about this coaching staff, is how much recruiting has been just a core, value of their whole coaching staff. Is we're going to go out and we're going to get the top level guys. I mean, it's amazing how many top level 4, even 5 stars Auburn's getting on the radar of, because our coaches are just getting out there and doing work.
Cam Coleman may be the highest rated. He may be the most highest prospect we've ever recruited at receiver.
It legitimately could be. I mean, we had some that
argument.
Oh, I think so, pretty easily. I mean, most of Auburn's wide receivers have been 4 stars, maybe 5 stars. And
they've come on board and turned into a good receiver, but none of them were all like, we had a few. I mean, when's the last time we had a 1,000-yard receiver?
It's been
Hugh,
so long.
Hugh used to produce 1,000-yard receivers like I drink coffee, and I mean, I have 6 cups a day. I'm drinking one right now. So, anyways, all right, I'll move on. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I mean, and I think that's by itself, wide receiver Cam Coleman and Perry Thompson are just kind of, it shows the possibility of how we can go out and recruit now. And we're doing what they call stacking classes on classes on classes. And we've got now a couple really good classes. 2026 is looking really, really bright. And again, that's part of who these coaches are. So like, I think that also comes in perspective of this season, where if you start hearing Auburn fans being like, we have a shot at the playoffs, I think you should potentially take a step back. I don't think this year is our year. Hugh Freeze has been pretty outspoken about he doesn't think this is our year. He thinks next year is 2025, but this year is still a building year to get to that playoff, to getting to, I think, where Hugh Freeze sees Auburn, and your kind of info about Auburn being a top 13 program just historically, I think fits in. I think we're a top 10 program historically. And that's just because of the tradition. We've gotten national championships. We've had multiple Heisman. We can do that. Now, as a recent, I was playing college football and they rank Auburn as like a tier 3 school. Now, I would argue that we're not a tier 3 school. We're probably a tier 2 school, but still, it kind of shows you the perception right now is a little bit lower. And I think we need to rise in the ranks. And I think the way that you do that is consistent recruiting and consistent winning. And I think Auburn's well on their path to doing that, especially even, considering last year, it could have easily, in my mind, been like an 8-5 season. I mean, think about the close losses that we had, particularly against Bama. And you're thinking, yeah, you could have turned that around.
Oh, yeah. I mean, all you had to do is hold on 4th and 23 and then not lose to New Mexico State at home.
Yeah. No, exactly.
That's pretty, when people are like, oh, yeah, well, you could say that every year. I'm like, I get that. But, I mean, literally you had to not lose to New Mexico State.
Yeah.
And not give up 4th and 23. I'm not even saying beat Georgia when they had to score on the last drive. Like that's, that was, they won that game. They drove down, they won.
Yeah.
But you could throw that in there.
Absolutely.
Now you could counter with the Cal game. It was ugly and we had a game winning drive. I get that. But
yeah,
just a few things go our way and that's 8 wins.
Absolutely.
But we've been saying that, man. We had that with Bo, the year Bo got hurt. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, we were up on Mississippi State 28-0. We were even Harsin, his first year was very close to, was not far off from winning 9 games, and he only won 6.
Yeah.
So it's just, there's no margin for error. We don't have enough talent to make errors.
Yeah.
We're getting there, but right now you got to capitalize when it's there.
Yeah, that's my thought too. I do want to go over some of we'll kind of go over offense, high level defense, and special teams, kind of the changes and stuff going on there. So I did want to talk through the stuff going on offense because it's been a lot. So I wanted to kind of consolidate a lot of this for the listeners. So back in 2023, Auburn came out of the season 10th in the SEC in scoring with 26.2 points per game. Obviously not great. We can definitely do better than that. Finishing 10th in the SEC is not where we want to be. And I think we made some of those, a lot of big changes. We talked about them, wide receivers. We kept our running backs, which was our strength last year. Every one of our running backs is coming back, obviously, besides Brian Battie, and definitely thoughts and prayers still for him as he's recovering from getting injured, in the shooting. So, but besides, we still have Jarquez, Damari Austin, Jeremiah Cobb, Sean Jackson. I mean, I think any Jarquez, Damari, or Jeremiah Cobb could be starters at just about any SEC school. And Auburn has all 3 of them at our school. And I think that will pay dividends, particularly this season, when you don't have to ride Jarquez the whole season. You don't have to get him injured, and he can make it through a full season, which would be awesome. And I think at least my hope is, he becomes an 1,000-yard rusher, because we haven't had one in at least 3 or 4 years, it feels like. We also had some changeover of or at least a new quarterback in the quarterback system. Walker White came in as a freshman. and then Peyton Thorne is our quarterback number 1, which it's always funny. Everybody wants to see who else is available. I mean, you got to see that in the bowl game with Hank Brown. Hank Brown did amazing things. He was 7 of 9, 132 yards, got a touchdown when it felt like Auburn was just in the pits at the end of that game. But Hank Brown came in, gave Auburn some life, and that's really exciting. Hank Brown just earned himself, as of I think today or yesterday, when we're recording this, he earned himself the second string quarterback behind Peyton Thorne. So congrats to him. And then third string looks like it'd probably be Holden, and then you got Walker White as a true freshman. So any kind of thoughts on either quarterbacks and running backs as I was running through those before we go on to the rest of the offense?
No, man, I think you pretty much covered anything I would have talked about them.
Yeah. I will say, running back room, Jeremiah Cobb looking big. He's looking strong. I got to see him a couple Saturdays ago. Very excited to see him because last year he had 172 yards rushing, also had a couple touchdown catches. I think his role in the offense is going to be a little bit bigger. We all know Jarquez. We know what he can do. Damari Austin, I think he's a really solid running back, and I think he's about to have a breakout season. Like, it would not shock me if he's kind of nipping on the buds of Jarquez of who's getting the most yards in a game or the most carries in a game. Let's go over to wide receivers. I think tight ends. Again, a lot of changes going on there. We all know Hugh Freeze loves the big wide receiver. He went out, got a bunch of them, got a couple big guys like Cam Coleman, Perry Thompson, Bryce Kane, Malcolm Simmons. Brought in a couple or 3 really big transfers: Keandre Lambert-Smith, top receiver at Penn State; Sam Jackson, who came from Cal. He was actually he was one of the quarterbacks at Cal when we played them last season, so he'll get to face his teammates this season. And Robert Lewis, transfer from Georgia State. He has 1,300 plus yards and 14 touchdowns in his career at Georgia State. Obviously, it's Georgia State, but hopefully he can make the jump to the SEC level of football. And then we still had, I was looking at a couple of our big returners from wide receivers: Camden Brown, Caleb Burton, who had pretty good seasons last year. So, man, when I start listing out, like, I think I just listed out about like 10 wide receivers, and I think all of them could have shots in just about any other Auburn year at being starters. And we're talking about probably some of these freshmen are going to get starts, and they are very well deserving. Like, how does that make you feel about this transformation in the wide receiver room this season?
Yeah, I mean, they've come in and taken a weakness of ours for many, many years, and as of right now on paper turned it into a strength.
Yeah.
So that's positive and promising. I mean, everything looks great on paper. We got to go out there and show it. But you stack enough talent and keep stacking enough talent. That's why you do it, right? Because, you're not going to hit on everybody, but you get enough talented people in here, it's just math. I mean, you're going to have a good player.
And you're going to get better results because you have better players.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many games you don't win because you miss on an explosive play that a better player would have made, right? I mean, some of these games come down to just that. So, going back to the Cal game last year, Fairweather, he made a fantastic catch on that final drive, from Thorne. It was a little low, and, he's just talented. If he doesn't make that play, we don't continue that drive, and we don't win that ball game. So, it's the little things, and these really good, talented players will make those plays if you give them a chance more times than not.
Also kind of adjacent to this, just because Auburn has recently used their tight ends a lot, particularly, Rivaldo Fairweather and Brandon Frazier and Luke Deal a good bit. And I think that, some of that was to mask some of our wide receiver talent that we didn't necessarily have last season. And so we would go to them. And you look at a guy like Rivaldo Fairweather, he's a huge dude, and he was a big threat last year. I mean, I'm still a big believer that we're going to be using tight ends a good bit, just because we have just so many young guys And to me, if you rely on, guys like Rivaldo to help you, that's great. I just don't want them. I don't know about you, Jared, but I hope they do not have our tight end as our top receiver at the end of the season. Like, I think that would be a bad thing. That would mean our wide receivers were a bust. I don't think that's going to happen, but I think there's a time and a place for the tight end, and particularly in the red zone scenarios, because you just need a bigger body like a tight end. Any thoughts on the tight ends this year and how that might change from how we relied on them last season to how we're going to use them this season?
Not a ton. I mean, I think the times we do use them might be more successful because, like you said, we were having to rely on them. Well, now if they're having to put their better players on our receivers, the point of a tight end is it's usually a mismatch.
Yeah.
If it's not a mismatch, then it makes the job of a tight end harder. So if it can get back to truly being a mismatch and you have a talented tight end, then, I would expect even bigger things, even if it's in smaller doses.
Yeah.
Because the defense is having to spread themselves out a little more.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I feel like it frees up the tight end a little bit more. And just knowing Auburn's run game also, we're going to be putting multiple tight ends on the field at the same time, which could mean they're coming in to block, but it could also mean there are 2 extra receivers out there. So we could have 5 targets, maybe 6 if you include the running back out there. That's pretty exciting, to have that many options out there to catch a pass. Offensive line, overall, they since the spring, it's been roughly about the same offensive line. Though it was kind of interesting in this last week, Hugh Freeze called out some of the offensive line, saying that he wasn't completely happy with them, and I thought that was kind of interesting. I don't know if that means that we'll get a change up of the offensive line, but maybe that's just to spur them on and get them back focused again and as good as they need to be, because we all know as a lot of seasons, if a offensive line is not protecting the quarterback, not opening up holes for the running backs, it's going to be a problem. And so to have a good offensive line is going to be very important. So I think that'll be something for us to keep an eye on if there's any major changes to the offensive line and what they end up doing this season. I mean, last year was honestly one of the better seasons off offensive line that I can remember, which is saying a lot because I feel like we've had very subpar offensive lines. So let's transition to our defense conversation. And then once we finish that up, we'll go to special teams and we'll get into each of the games and what that might look like. So on defense, we've already mentioned we got a new defensive coordinator, DJ Durkin. I mean, he's known for being high energy. He you can tell, brings every amount of energy, and you can tell also that the defense kind of feeds off of that, which is pretty exciting. I mean, think back to like the Kevin Steele days or the Will Muschamp when he was at Auburn. Those defenses, they kind of embodied a little bit of their coach. Look at like Bruce Pearl, for example, in basketball. His team kind of emulates a lot of his personality, which is pretty awesome. And I think that'll be the case for this defense. They're going to be high energy. They're going to bring lots of pressure. They're going to throw lots of looks at offenses, and they're going to have to figure it out, which I think is always a positive. What that means to an offense is, hey, I'm going to see a lot of things, and I might see something I've never seen before on film. And I think that's the big benefit I think DJ Durkin brings to this defense. I was looking back at the stats for last year. Auburn was 41st in the nation in defense, which isn't great. It definitely improved this last season, but we've got a long way to go because I'm still a firm believer. I think our defense is usually, and this year should be about the same, like one of the better defenses in the SEC, and I think we can do that. We just have to continue grinding and keeping guys healthy. Let's go through just a few of the guys on defense, just so you're familiar with them. We've still got DJ James, Nehemiah Pritchett, Keontae Scott. We got a couple of new guys like Champ Anthony. We got some safeties like Jaron Thompson and Sylvester Smith. Linebackers, a lot of them you might have heard of, but we've got some new faces around here too. Eugene Asante, Wesley Steiner. I mean, you've got some guys that I think are going to be good for this linebacker core. And I think linebackers this year will be a probably an even better improvement. Last year felt like we were just kind of plugging holes in linebacker, so in that position. So I think we'll be at a better spot. Defensive line, man, you've got some big guys that are going to be coming after him. And I'm really excited, especially around like the edge positions. I mean, it is very exciting when you have actual guys that can come in and really rush the passer. So, yeah, very excited to see kind of what happens there. Jared, any other thoughts about the defense and the changes we made on defense this year under DJ Durkin?
No, I mean, we kind of talked about it earlier. I think Durkin's a good coach. So I am curious. I don't know his philosophy a lot, but I think, D-line is probably our biggest question mark, I guess. But there's been positive talk around that and the, practices leading up to the season. So I think linebacker might be a strength. Last year we missed out. Who was the guy that transferred from Ole Miss last year and got injured and only played a handful of games, or if that? Yeah. Him and Eugene Asante, I think they might surprise some people. Asante surprised a bunch of people last year. So, yeah, I think we're going to be okay. I think we're going to be solid. I think we're going to have a better offense, which is going to help out tremendously and not so much pressure on them. So, all in all, I look for a pretty good season.
Yeah, definitely. I think we'll improve from that being 41st in the nation. I would hope to get in, the maybe teens or 20s as far as total offense or total defense. Especially, I feel like Auburn's defense has struggled some because they're on the field so much. And if Auburn's offense can stay on the field a little bit longer, that allows our defense to rest. And I think that's a recipe for having a better defense overall. So, it's kind of like a lot of things. It's going to be a balance. It's going to be, if the offense stays on the field, I think the defense does a little bit better. So something to kind of see how that kind of plays out throughout the years, how that balance of offense and defense goes. And we'll round it out with the special teams. We got looks like Alex McPherson is probably going to come back, but if not, we've got Towns Magoo, who's a local boy from around Auburn. And it's pretty exciting to just know we've got a solid backup as long as if Alex McPherson is not able to go as kicker. Though Alex is apparently making some good improvements. We'll see. We are just less than a couple weeks away. And then we've got our regular punter, Oscar Chapman. He is, we all know he's really amazing. I looked up some stats on him. He was 23rd nationally in punting average. He averaged around 45 yards per punt, which is awesome. He's already on some preseason watch lists for punter. We've got our long snapper running with Reed. Love that he's always still doing stuff with our social media team at Auburn. Kick returner for special teams looks like it's probably going to be Jeremiah Cobb. I know Jarquez wanted to get out there and do some kickoff returns, but we'll see because that would mean he would put himself on the line of potentially getting injured a little bit more if he did kickoff returns, even though I know he would be very explosive. For punt returns, Keontae Scott looks like he'll be our primary punt returner, just like he was last season. And I think he's a really solid punt returner. So, and especially now, he's got a lot of experience under his belt since doing, I think, for the last year or two. All right. So, Jared, it's time to start breaking down each game. Let's start out with the very first game, Alabama A&M. This will be August 31st. It'll be a night game in Jordan-Hare, 6:30 Central Time on ESPN Plus. Alabama A&M last year went 5-6, and I think this should be a pretty simple one. It's a nice, easy warm up for Auburn. We come in and we should be able to beat them. Any other thoughts on the Alabama A&M game?
I want to say no. I still have some PTSD from New Mexico State.
Oh my gosh!
But this one should not be a problem. But you never know, man. First game, you never know.
Yeah, very true. And you have new offensive coordinator and new defensive coordinator. In some ways, a new offense. Not completely, obviously, but there's a lot of new key pieces to it. I still think that we win, and we win big. I think for my score prediction, we're going to do the same thing as we've done in years previous. We'll do a spread, but this year I'm gonna change it up. I'd kind of hinted at a new game, and I think what we're going to do is the difference of what you predict and what the actual score was. So, for example, I think Auburn's going to win by 35 points. Say Auburn wins by 31 points. Then that would mean I have essentially 4. And it's kind of like you want to have the minimal number of points at the end of the season. We'll add on all of our points, and then at the end of the season, we'll see between Jared and I who's closer at the end of the season. So I'm excited to kind of see how this plays out, see how close we are to our predictions. Jared, what are you thinking for your prediction for this Alabama A&M game?
Well, it's going to contradict me just saying I was a little worried. I think we win by 41.
All right.
Do you need an actual score?
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, you're welcome to give a score too, kind of in combination.
No, I'm not that smart. We're just going to go with a spread.
All right, love it. Next game is the Cal Golden Bears. They're coming to Jordan-Hare. Last year we went all the way to Cal. We had the 9:30 Central Time, or for us Eastern Time people, it was 10:30 Eastern Time at night game. Well, I think Auburn's returning the favor a little bit. We're going to be playing them at 2:30 Central Time, so middle of the day. Should be really hot in September. So I was looking just because I was curious, how hot does it really get in Berkeley, California? Well, right about now, the highs are around 75 to 80. So I think it's going to be just a touch hotter on September 7th at 2:30 in the afternoon for the Golden Bears. And to me, that makes me really excited. Like, kind of returns the favor of us playing. It feels like it. And well, I guess we were actually playing at midnight during this game. So we return the favor a little bit. I will mention, last year Cal went 6-7. Obviously, we talked about it earlier. Auburn barely squeaked out a win over them last year. Their head coach, Justin Wilcox, hired a new offensive coordinator and also brought in a transfer quarterback. So we'll see how things go. I mean, they've got a lot of kind of moving pieces. I think their head coach still has not had a winning season since being there. So they've been struggling. And now they're in the ACC, which, with all the conference stuff going on, kind of interesting. So that's just one of those moves. Now Cal's in the ACC, which does not make sense. You're in California, but you're the Atlantic Conference. What? Like, who, what? That doesn't make any sense. Anyway, rant over.
Goes back to the old, like in the 90s, I think the Braves were in the San Francisco Giants division.
Yeah, why?
It was very weird. Yeah.
I mean, I get it, money, but still, like, that's ridiculous. Anyway, for my score prediction for this game, I was looking at ESPN. They're predicting us to win 72% of the time. I mean, I think we this is our second game of the season, so of course, I think there's still going to be some things that probably concern us as Auburn fans, but I think we still win double digits. I'll say 14 points, and it could be more. I think Auburn, even though they scared us at Cal, Auburn also just played atrocious, it felt like, at Cal. So I think we can clean a lot up. And since we played them last year, I think we'll know them a little bit better too. So, Jared, how are you feeling about this game?
I could be talked into being scared, but I also think it's at home. I'm not saying it's, a blowout early, but I think we win by 21.
Yeah.
I think in the end, the home crowd, the travel across country, I think the talent's just going to be too much in the end, and I think it winds up looking a lot better than it probably really was of a game.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go with 21.
Yeah. I'm honestly thinking this could be one that headed into the fourth quarter, we only have a 1-score lead, and then that's when it opens up. We get a pick six, we get something like that. And I think we just started imposing our will on them, especially in our run game. Like I have full faith that we can do something special there against Cal. Next game is New Mexico, and that one it'll be the third home game, in September. Well, I guess second game of September, but third home game at the beginning of the season. Night game, 6:30. I'll also mention, isn't it nice? I feel like now that they're starting to announce more of the times for games. Sometimes they'll do the flex thing, which they do for some of them, but it at least gives you an idea that it's not going to be a morning game, or it will be an afternoon game or something like that. I'm a big fan of it. I know the NFL does that. Even basketball does that. They go ahead and just announce this is the time, this is the TV station, all that kind of stuff. So I think it's college football stepping in the right direction.
It may. I wonder if it has a lot to do. CBS, the contract with them was they got to pick a certain number of games. So they were basically trying to communicate with ESPN. Yeah. And now that ESPN basically handles it all, they can probably slot that out a lot better for the entire year.
It could be that. I hadn't thought about it.
There is no sharing. They're all through. Even if they're on ABC, they're going to be through the ESPN parent network. So, the SEC network is also ESPN owned. So it's basically one company now controlling it. So that might give a little more freedom to this.
Yeah, I think that might help. And when you're talking about as a fan, Jared, you and I live in Atlanta, coming from out of town. It's kind of nice to know roughly for pretty much any of these games, roughly the amount of, time. Now, you could potentially have, I'm looking at, for example, the Arkansas game. Well, it could be slated for the 2:30 time, but it also could be slated for the 5 or 7 o'clock at night game. So you just don't know, which that's a pretty big range, but at least it's not going to be a 11 a.m. kickoff or something like that. So back to the New Mexico. I know we kind of went on a little bit of a rant there. New Mexico last season went 4-8, 2-6 in their Mountain West Conference. I just don't think that we're gonna have any issues with them. This is again probably one of those good tune-up games, especially after a slightly tougher game against Cal. And I think we win this one probably by like 31 points, maybe a little bit more. I'm going to say 31 points for now, but I have a feeling closer to the game, I'm going to bump that up a little bit. Jared, what's your prediction for this game?
Oh, boy. Given that there's no state at the end of New Mexico, people don't get confused. This is not New Mexico State, which shouldn't have been a problem. This is a different team. This is just straight up New Mexico.
Goodness.
I don't know. I know nothing about them. I'm going to go just what I would go for a game like this, right? I'm going to go. What'd you say? 30? How much did you say? 31.
31.
All right, just to not be exactly the same, I'll say 30. I don't. Basically, I just went prices right on you, didn't I? Where you go?
Yeah, you did.
You go $1 below or above, I guess. So, I'm going 30. I don't really think about them, but we should win that game by 30.
Yeah. One thing that I did learn about them, and maybe is one of those I'd heard it, but their mascot is a Lobo, and I was like, "What the heck is a Lobo? Like, is that a hobo? Like, just with an L? I don't understand." So I looked it up. Just for a fun fact, it's essentially a wolf. And so another kind of fun fact, and this is a fun one about New Mexico, they actually, when they had announced that they were the Lobos, actually used to have on a leash a live wolf, which if you've ever seen a wolf at any capacity, especially if you've been up close and personal with them, they're huge. There was one time I went to a wolf preserve, and the wolves, they were, kind of already domesticated, but they're still like wild animals, walked around you. You sat on the ground and they literally like kind of rubbed up against you. And you're like, you compare that to like a husky, and they're so much bigger than what you imagine. And that by itself is pretty cool. Anyway, side story. I think wolves are pretty cool. But I still think
feel like I'm watching National Geographics. Is this an Auburn podcast or? Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I can talk about tigers too, but actually,
how did they come to be? Let's talk about Eagles, and I'm just messing with you.
And then we have our final or our fourth game with Arkansas. It'll be in Jordan-Hare, and this will either be again one of those like 2:30 or sometime in the evening, 5 to 7. I think we just absolutely obliterate Arkansas, if I'm being honest. It's just amazing that Sam Pittman is still head coach at Arkansas, even though I know the coaching realm, the coaching market wasn't great. But Arkansas, their team, I think they lost faith in Sam Pittman. They went 4-8, only won one SEC game last year. I mean, there was talk that some of their players were just like goofing off watching movies at halftime when Auburn played them. Like that's kind of the culture going on in Arkansas. It's just wild to me. Like it would not shock me if Sam Pittman, like game 5, gets fired because Auburn just obliterates them. And I would love that so much. I would love it so much. Actually, I'm going to make that prediction. Let's go ahead and make it. I think Sam Pittman's going to get fired after we put a whooping up on the Hogs. So there's my prediction for the game. I think we're also going to beat them by a good bit. I think we'll probably beat them, I'll say like 17 points. Maybe it's a little too optimistic, but man, I'm not scared of Arkansas as in some years I had. So, Jared, what are you thinking about this game? How do you think this game's going to play out?
I don't know. I mean, I think we win. It's at home. I think we win. I could see it. I could see a 17. Did you say 17? I could see 17. Probably going to go 13 just because it is the first SEC game and you never know. I agree with you though. I spoke with an Arkansas fan in the offseason, and he said basically the money people there had thought they had a deal to get Gus to come in, and that fell through. I know that gets talked about all the time, but this guy seemed to actually talk to people that said it was they thought they were going to have a done deal
every time. And I feel like Gus, like it's gonna be on their like Gus's dying bed, and they're gonna be like, "Yeah, I think Gus might come," and you're like, "He's
Arkansas.
Almost dead. What are you doing?" No, like
I think though I know because the reason was, I mean, there was even a report that he was let go. I don't know if you remember that. I'm pretty sure it got leaked out, and they're like, "Wait a minute, he's not really gone," and then everybody's like, "What's going on?"
Yeah,
Sam Pittman's still there. Apparently, that was leaked that they thought they had a deal, and once that fell through, I think you're right. I think it was like, okay, well, there's not really anybody else to go get. We're kind of too far down now, so let's just roll with it. But I'm with you. I would not be surprised. Listen, I like Sam Pittman, actually. I like his energy. I hope it doesn't happen except for this game here, but I would not be surprised if he gets fired mid-season.
I mean, I was shocked at the end of last season. It just felt like the writing was on the wall for him. My parents went to Arkansas. They talked to some of the locals. It seemed almost inevitable. And yet here we are next season. Sam Pittman's their head coach. And maybe this is, for Arkansas, maybe they let their, Sam Pittman go halfway through the season at some point, and that opens them up to some of the better head coaches and the opportunities that they might be looking for. I mean, if I'm being honest, I would love to see I feel like it would be kind of fun to see Gus go there, after his stint at UCF, but I just don't think it. I mean, it's just comical at this point that Gus's name gets thrown around as the next head coach at Arkansas all the time.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, so let's talk about the next game, and this will be kind of the final one, homestead of this season. It feels like because we're about to go on the road after this one but we've got Oklahoma at home. Preseason Oklahoma is number 16, and this is slotted for that 2:30 to 3:30 Central Time slot. Oklahoma had a pretty solid season last year, 10-3, and then in their conference they went 7-2. Obviously, now the big storyline is Oklahoma and Texas coming into the SEC, and it's by itself, pretty exciting that we get to play them. Kind of reminds me of the energy of when Texas A&M came into the SEC, and I got to go out to College Station, Texas, and I mean that's kind of the energy. It feels exciting, a good, solid college football, pedigree of a team, and now I think they're going to really be tested in the SEC. I personally think that, and I think a lot of Auburn fans think this too. This is going to be a really big key game for Auburn. Up until this point, I mean, we would have had a couple challenges with Cal potentially and Arkansas, but I mean, when you're talking about a top 16 team like Oklahoma, and I expect them probably to be undefeated at this point, or maybe one loss. I mean, you're talking about a team that could really push Auburn and challenge us. If you look at what ESPN they predict already for this game, they're predicting that Oklahoma's gonna win. The spread's already at 2.5 points, and Auburn in ESPN's prediction models is only winning 38% of the time. So I think it's going to be a tough one, but I definitely believe in Auburn's home field advantage at Jordan-Hare. And I mean, this year, if we can get things going with a win against Oklahoma, I mean, you're talking about a 5-0 start, which I think is pretty reasonable. If we lose to Oklahoma, I don't think it's the end of the world, but it would definitely be kind of setting the trajectory for this season. And I think that would bode well for this team to get their. I feel like they need like a confidence boost in some ways after having some some little bit rougher seasons over the last couple seasons. So for my score prediction for this game, I'm gonna say Auburn loses, unfortunately, to Oklahoma. Though I could also see us winning. I just at this point, I think we lose, and it's going to be a close one, but I think we'll probably lose by 7 points to Oklahoma. Jared, what are you thinking about Oklahoma this year? Do you think we can, sneak out a win against Oklahoma?
Yeah, actually, I do predict us to beat them. I don't, it's going to be odd because the thing about Jordan-Hare is I mean, you heard Kirby in the offseason, right? I mean, he says it's the toughest place to play in the world. What type of energy are they going to bring for a new conference opponent, Oklahoma? Mm-hmm. There's not a history there, but it's a big opponent. But then it's only a 2:30 game, and it's not like 2:30 in November, right? It's still going to be a little daylight. So it depends on the energy. But I think Hugh's getting us back to a place to where if your name's not Georgia or Alabama or LSU, it's going to be tough to come into Jordan-Hare and win. And I think that's going to be enough. I think we win by 6. I think Oklahoma's I really think that their offense is going to struggle. Remember, their starting quarterback last year went to Oregon.
Oh, yeah.
So he's now their starting quarterback at Oregon. I don't know who the quarterback is at Oklahoma. I'm sure they got a good transfer. But, that's going to be a big road test for them. I think Venables is going to have their defense flying all over the field like he always does. I don't know if their offense is going to do very well. I think they're going to struggle in Jordan-Hare. I think we're going to struggle just because they have a good defense. I think it's going to be a low-scoring affair, but I think we win by 6.
I would certainly love a win. And honestly, just knowing myself, being a hardcore Barner, by the time this game comes up, I'm going to switch my prediction from Auburn losing by 7 to us winning by 7.
I mean, unless we fall off the rails in the first few games, you're gonna have us winning.
You're probably right
by then.
All right, let's move on to the 6th game of the season against Georgia. This one will be in Athens, and it's either that flex time of somewhere in the afternoon, like 2:30 to 3:30, or it could be an evening game, 5 to 7 Central Time start. Georgia obviously had a pretty good season last year, came up a little bit shy lost to Bama in the SEC championship game, and that kept them out of, thankfully. I don't know about you, but there was definitely a sigh of relief as an Auburn fan living in the state of Georgia, that Georgia was not going to be national champions at least last season. So that felt kind of nice, right? But I do.
Yeah, I mean, if you there's not really a good scenario. Alabama went in the place, but it's better to not have both of them in there.
Yeah.
It was good to only have one, and not deal with both Bama and Georgia being your biggest rivals being in there.
And I feel like that's, as an Auburn fan, that's why I think Auburn's strength of schedule is always so tough, because Georgia and Bama are permanent rivals, and we're going to play them every year for the foreseeable future. And it's just obviously tough. We're playing at Georgia and at Bama this year, but that's just the way things go. I will say the one thing that took me, I think, until this year to finally get used to was playing Georgia so early in the season. I feel like this might be the first season that it feels kind of normal to play them so early. We've played them fifth in this, in the season, and now we're playing them in our sixth game. And I feel like it's slowly getting there. Does it feel like it's getting more normal now that Georgia, we're playing them earlier in the season?
Yeah. I think I'm just thinking more about how we have struggled against them than the time of year. But yeah, I do. It used to be that, November, sometimes it was, a 30-degree game. Sometimes it was a weird hot November. But yeah, you never knew. Well, now it's probably going to be hot, right? I mean, it's October 5th. So it does still feel a little weird when the actual game happens. So yeah, I mean, it was wise and to do that on our end, because just ending with Alabama and Georgia is just brutal.
Yeah.
So, this gives you a chance to learn a lot, regroup, and you still got a lot of games to play after playing Georgia.
I will mention, and this was kind of interesting, I was looking up some news about Georgia. They still have their quarterback, Carson Beck. And Carson Beck apparently in the offseason made some waves. He purchased a Lamborghini in the offseason with all that NIL money I'm sure he's making. And this Lambo was kind of in the range of $270,000. Like, he just had $270,000 to throw around. Which
nice. He's getting up to your level now, AJ.
Apparently.
Yeah.
Apparently.
His Lambo's too. That's even beneath you, isn't it? You're more. I was gonna act like I know about cars. I don't. Lamborghini is the only fancy car I know. Ferrari, but I don't know what's better.
Yeah. But it's pretty wild to see that as I feel like it used to be the standard. Alabama, it was like, oh, they got the Dodge Charger or whatever, and now looking, a Dodge Charger is like chump change for some of these guys. They're not going down to that level.
The only difference here is that Carson Beck can title this Lamborghini in his name, whereas in the past, it very well might have been titled in a booster's name. But
that's probably right.
So, no, it's all good. I mean, it's a part of me is like, oh, that's a lot of money. I hope he's getting good advice, because I don't want him to. He's probably got a couple of million.
I know.
I don't want him to blow that in case the NFL doesn't work out. Because even though he's a Georgia player, I wish the best for him personally. So hopefully he had fun with this purchase and is getting good advice elsewhere.
I hope so. I mean, it just reminds me of, I don't know if you saw that there was a Netflix series on I think they just called it Broke or something. And it was all the NFL and pro athletes in baseball that just went broke because they didn't know how to manage their money.
Dude.
And when I see somebody buying a almost $300,000 car that's a depreciating asset like a Lamborghini, what are you doing? Put your money in something else.
Dude, Mike Tyson made $50 million for a fight, and he went bankrupt. How is that?
That's crazy.
How's that even possible? So, anyways, yeah, just goes to show you, if you're not wise with your money, there is no enough, right? If you're not wise.
Yeah.
With it. But anyways, good for him. Hopefully it all pans out. And, hopefully he's out driving the Lamborghini around and forgets about the game on October 5th.
And I hope he doesn't get arrested like it feels like all the other Georgia.
I wasn't going to go there.
I went there.
You
I'm
went
not
there.
afraid.
I have too many Georgia friends. I'm going to keep it PC, but yeah. That's funny.
It happens.
Oh,
it happens. We know.
All right, so in this game, I actually think, so what's the line, 23 or something?
23 and a half.
We're not winning at Athens. It ain't happening. But I think we get closer, right? I think we get to that point of, like, this is actually a ball game, right? So they have to keep fighting the entire game, which is sad that that's our goal, but that's how far we've kind of separated. So I actually think they win by 14. I think the last touchdown is the one to kind of, make it very clear that we don't have a shot. But I don't think it's over in the first quarter.
Yeah, my thought is you almost view Georgia at this point, because we're rebuilding. Georgia has had a pipeline of top classes after top classes of recruits. I think you almost kind of see where are we stacking up. It's not are we going to win, because I don't think that's realistic. If we come into the expectation of we're going to come to Athens and beat them, when I feel like we haven't even scored multiple touchdowns against Georgia, and it feels like forever in a game, that to me is just a sign of progress, that we can come to Athens and not be as intimidated as we had in previous seasons.
I will be the most shocked I am in a long time if we go in there and win this ball game.
This would be probably the craziest game, and I was at the Camback game in 2010. Like that, this would be nuts.
Yeah, unless this thing just listen. I talked to a Georgia alumni recently, and he said that he has communicated with somebody who is close to the program and said offensively they're missing some weapons, and he would not be surprised if they lost 3 games this year. I don't buy it. I know they have a tough schedule, but that came directly from a Georgia fan. So
yeah,
I don't know. We'll see. We're not going to be one of them, but if we are, you're going to have to hold me back, because the excitement level. I mean, if we run that table and beat Georgia, then yeah, just put me down for wins the rest of the year.
Yeah, essentially at that point, if you can beat Georgia and Athens, which not many teams have been able to do.
Yeah, it's not happening. I wish it was, but it's not.
I know, and I don't think I've given my score prediction, so I think I implied it, but I think we lose. I'm kind of in the same lines as you, probably by like 17, maybe a little bit more than that. But I'll say 17 for now. We lose to Georgia in Athens.
That's fair.
All right, Jared. Let's we'll come back to finish up the rest of the season and our predictions for it in a later show. But before we do, how can people stay in touch with you in the meantime?
You can just find me on Facebook under my name, Jared Davis.
And you can find me on Twitter at @JAY_. It's always great to be an Auburn Tiger and War Eagle.
War Eagle.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode on the E2C Network. On your way out, I want to remind you to stop by e2cnetwork.com. It's your one-stop shop for all our content across our podcast, YouTube channel, and much more. To stay up to date with us, make sure you're following social media accounts such as Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. While our content here may always be Auburn sports heavy, if it's orange and blue, it's what we do. War Eagle.